Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The knife pressed against my carotid artery didn't tremble, despite the blood slicking the hand that held it. "Touch me again," the boy hissed, his voice a jagged ruin of pain and defiance. "And I'll paint these expensive silk sheets with your life." Thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, casting a strobe light flash over the scene. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply stared down at him. This broken, beautiful creature pinned beneath me, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with the panic of a trapped animal. He thought he was the predator here because he held the blade. He didn't realize that in this city, in this room, I was the one who decided who breathed and who bled. I slowly raised my hands, a smirk touching my lips. "Go ahead, Kalen," I whispered, the sound cutting through the storm. "But if you kill me, who keeps the wolves at the door from finishing what they started in that alley?" Part 1. The rain and the ruin 3 days earlier, the night had smelled of ozone and rotting garbage. It was a typical Tuesday in the lower district of Oakhaven, a festering wound of a city masked by neon lights and hollow promises. I am Julian Vane. To the public, I am a venture capitalist, a patron of the arts, a man of refined tastes. To the subterranean world that actually runs this city, I am the architect, a fixer who restructures problems until they disappear. I don't deal in messy emotions. I deal in leverage. I was leaving the back entrance of the Velvet Lotus, a gambling den where a senator had unfortunately lost his nerve along with his pension, when I heard the sound. It was the wet, sickening thud of flesh striking concrete, followed by a groan that sounded more like a prayer for death than a cry for help. Logic dictated I keep walking. My driver, Silas, was already idling the phantom black sedan at the curb. But something about the rhythm of the violence paused me. It wasn't a mugging. It was an execution. I turned the corner. Under the sickly yellow buzz of a street lamp, 3 men were taking turns on a figure curled into the fetal position in the mud. They were heavy-muscle syndicate enforcers. The man on the ground was barely conscious, his silver-dyed hair matted with blood and rain, his clothes torn to shreds. "That's enough," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of authority that makes lesser men flinch. The largest of the attackers turned, a pipe in his hand. "Walk away, suit, unless you want your teeth kicked down your throat." I didn't move. I simply adjusted my cufflinks. "I believe you're damaging my property." The lie hung in the air, heavy and absurd. The enforcer laughed. "This piece of trash? He owes the dragon head 50 grand. He ain't nobody's property but the worms." "I'll buy the debt," I said, pulling a platinum checkbook from my breast pocket. It was a reckless move. A stupid move. Why? Because as the lightning flashed, the boy on the ground had lifted his head. One eye was swollen shut, but the other, it was a piercing, defiant violet. Even broken, even dying, he looked at me not with gratitude, but with a scathing assessment. He looks like a fallen angel, I thought, a rare crack forming in my icy demeanor. I wrote the figure, adding a 0 just to ensure they left immediately. The enforcer snatched the check, spat on the boy, and signaled his crew. "He's all yours, moneybags. Hope he's worth it. He bites." As the thugs vanished into the rain, I stepped forward. The boy tried to push himself up, his arms trembling violently, before collapsing back into the muck. "Silas," I called out over my shoulder. "Get the plastic covers for the back seats. We're taking a stray home." Part 2. The golden cage consciousness returned to Kalen Rhee in fragments. First, the smell. Not the metallic tang of blood or the sour stench of the alley, but something sterile. Lavender, antiseptic, expensive linen. Then the sensation. He wasn't lying on cold asphalt. He was floating on a cloud. Softness enveloped him. He shot up, a scream dying in his throat as agony ripped through his ribs. He gasped, clutching his side. He was in a bed the size of his entire apartment. The room was cavernous, bathed in the soft glow of recessed lighting. The walls were lined with art that cost more than his life. And he was naked. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his system. He scrambled backward, pulling the duvet up to his chin, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his bruised ribs. The door opened. A man walked in, tall, devastatingly handsome in a way that felt manufactured, wearing a charcoal waistcoat and dress trousers. He held a silver tray with a bowl of steaming water and fresh bandages. It was the man from the alley, the man with the checkbook. "You're awake," Julian said, his voice smooth like velvet over gravel. "Good. The doctor said you might sleep for another 24 hours. Where am I?" Kalen's voice was a rasp. "Who are you?" "I'm Julian, and you are in my home. You're safe." Julian set the tray down on the bedside table and reached out a hand to check the temperature of Kalen's forehead. Kalen slapped the hand away. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. "Don't touch me." Julian paused, his hand hovering in midair. He didn't look offended. He looked mildly intrigued. "I need to change your dressings, Kalen. The infection in that shoulder wound was severe." "I said don't touch me." Kalen snarled, backing up until he hit the headboard. His eyes darted around the room, assessing exits, weapons. He saw his clothes, what was left of them, folded on a chair. You bought me." Julian sighed, taking a seat in a velvet armchair, crossing his long legs. "I paid your debt. There is a distinction." "Is there?" Kalen spat. "Rich bastards like you don't drop 50 grand on a stranger out of the kindness of your hearts. I know what you are. I know what this is." "Enlighten me," Julian said dryly. "You're a pervert," Kalen accused, his face flushing with humiliation and rage. "You saw a pretty face getting smashed in and thought you'd salvage the goods for your own collection. You stripped me. You touched me while I was out." Julian's expression hardened. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stood up, towering over the bed. "I stripped you because your clothes were fused to your skin with dried blood. I touched you to stitch a 3-inch gash in your side that would have killed you by morning." "Liar!" Kalen shouted, though his voice wavered. "You think because you paid for me, you own me? I'd rather die in that alley than be your whore." Julian stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched, taut as a piano wire. "If I wanted a whore, Kalen, I could have a line of willing participants out the door in 10 minutes, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I saved you because you have fire, and it seemed a waste to let that fire be extinguished in the gutter." He tossed a bottle of painkillers onto the bed. "Think what you want. Call me a pervert, a monster, a savior. It makes no difference. You can't leave." Kalen narrowed his eyes. "Watch me. The dragon head accepted my check," Julian explained calmly, walking to the window to look out at the city skyline. "But the interest wasn't covered. If you step out that door, their trackers will pick you up within 3 blocks. And this time they won't just beat you. They'll take fingers." He turned back, his silhouette framed by the city lights. "You work for me now. You're my personal assistant. My shadow. You live here, you work here until the debt is paid. That is the deal. Take it or walk out the door and die." Part 3. The friction of souls. The following weeks were a study in cold warfare. Kalen was a terrible assistant. He was surly, aggressive, and broke more coffee cups than he served. Yet Julian didn't fire him. For Julian, Kalen was a puzzle. Julian was used to sycophants, people who bowed and scraped for a crumb of his power. Kalen was different. Kalen hated him. And in that hatred, there was an honesty that Julian found intoxicating. They circled each other like wolves in a cage. One evening, after a particularly grueling gala where Julian had to navigate the shark-infested waters of high society, they returned to the penthouse. Julian was exhausted, rubbing his temples. Kalen was loosening his tie, looking uncomfortable in the designer suit Julian had forced him to wear. "You almost broke the ambassador's wrist," Julian noted, pouring himself a scotch. "He grabbed my ass," Kalen retorted, raiding the fridge for a protein shake. He's lucky I didn't break his neck. He is a vital contact for the merger. He's a creep. Birds of a feather, I guess, Kalen muttered. Julian slammed his glass down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, pinning Kalen against the refrigerator. I have been nothing but patient with you, Julian growled, his face inches from Kalen's. I clothed you. I fed you. I gave you a purpose. And yet you look at me like I'm the devil. Because you hold the leash, Kalen yelled back, not flinching. His violet eyes burned. You act like a saint, but you're just a jailer with better thread count. You enjoy this. You enjoy having me dependent on you. I enjoy competence, Julian roared. I enjoy loyalty. 2 things you seem incapable of understanding. Loyalty is earned, not bought. They were breathing heavily, chests heaving. The anger in the air was thick, palpable, but beneath it, something else was twisting. Heat, a gravitational pull. Julian looked at Kalen's mouth. He saw the tremor in Kalen's lower lip. You think I want to own you? Julian whispered, his hand coming up to graze Kalen's jawline. His thumb brushed over a fading bruise. If I wanted to own you, Kalen, I wouldn't be arguing with you in a kitchen at 2 in the morning. I would have broken you already. Kalen's breath hitched. He should have pushed Julian away. He should have kneed him in the groin. But the heat of Julian's body was overwhelming. For the first time, Kalen didn't see the arrogance. He saw the loneliness in Julian's eyes. A vast, hollow emptiness that mirrored his own. Then why don't you? Kalen challenged, his voice barely audible. Why don't you break me? It was a dare. It was an invitation. Julian leaned in, his lips brushing against Kalen's ear. Because I want you to give it to me. I want you to choose to be mine. He pulled away abruptly, leaving Kalen shivering against the cold steel of the fridge, confused and aching in a way he couldn't name. Part 4. The serpent's strike. The fragile equilibrium shattered 2 days later. The dragon head hadn't just wanted money. Kalen, in his former life as an underground fighter, had overheard things. Locations of shipments. Names of dirty cops. The syndicate realized that letting Kalen go, even for 50 grand, was a liability. Julian was in a meeting in his study when the security alarms wailed. Glass shattered in the living room. Gunfire erupted. Julian drew a handgun from beneath his desk, a sleek, matte black custom piece, and sprinted into the hallway. Kalen! He found Kalen in the living room, crouched behind a marble sofa. 3 men in tactical gear were advancing, suppressing fire, chewing up the expensive decor. Kalen had a letter opener in his hand, pathetic against assault rifles, but the boy had the eyes of a killer. Get down! Julian fired twice, dropping the lead attacker. He slid behind the sofa next to Kalen. Are you hit? No, Kalen gasped, wiping dust from his face. They're here for me. Julian, give me up. They'll torch the place if you don't. Shut up, Julian snapped, reloading. I'm serious. You said it yourself. I'm just an investment. Cut your losses. Julian grabbed Kalen by the lapels, pulling him close. You are not an investment. Not anymore. Julian stood up, firing over the couch, providing cover. Run to the panic room. Now. I'm not leaving you. Go. A grenade skittered across the floor. Time seemed to slow. Julian saw the canister. He knew the blast radius. He looked at Kalen, at the violet eyes that had haunted him since that rainy night. Julian didn't think. He didn't calculate leverage. He threw himself over Kalen, tackling him to the ground and shielding the boy's body with his own. The explosion was deafening. The world turned white, then black. Part 5. The truth in the silence. When Julian woke, the pain was absolute. It felt as if his back had been flayed open. He was lying on his stomach. The smell of antiseptic was back, but this time, it was mixed with tears. You idiot, a voice sobbed. You absolute colossal idiot. Julian forced his eyes open. He was in the master bedroom. Kalen was sitting by the bed, his face tear-streaked, holding Julian's hand with a grip that threatened to crush bone. "Kalen," Julian croaked. "Don't speak," Kalen sniffled, wiping his eyes. "The doctor said you have shrapnel in your back. Concussion. Burn damage. You used your body as a shield." "Tactical decision," Julian murmured, trying to smile but grimacing instead. "Bullshit," Kalen whispered. He leaned down, his forehead resting on the mattress near Julian's hand. "You risked it all. Your life. Your empire. For a debt slave." "I told you," Julian rasped, squeezing Kalen's hand weakly. "I don't make bad investments." Kalen lifted his head. The anger was gone. The defensive walls he had built for years, the walls that kept everyone out, had crumbled. "You're not a pervert," Kalen said, a watery laugh escaping him. "You're a masochist." "Perhaps." Kalen stood up and gently brushed a lock of hair from Julian's damp forehead. The touch was reverent. "I stayed. The police came, the cleaners came. I could have run. My debt was cancelled in the chaos. But I stayed." "Why?" Julian asked, his heart pounding against his bruised ribs. Kalen leaned down. This time, there was no hesitation. He pressed his lips to Julian's, softly, carefully, a kiss that tasted of salt and promise. "Because," Kalen whispered against his lips, "I think I finally figured out the difference between being bought and being cherished. And I'm not going anywhere, architect. You're stuck with me." And as Julian Vane looked into the eyes of the boy who had once held a knife to his throat, he realized that for all his money, for all his power, this was the first time he had truly won. And that is how the architect built a home for the stray. If you enjoyed seeing Julian burn the world down for his love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive someone who bought you if they were willing to die for you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.